Penguin Random House presents The Penguin Book of Indian Ghost Stories by Ruskin Bond, read by Akshay.
The Penguin Book of Indian Ghost Stories, edited by Ruskin Bond, narrated by Akshay. Out of the Dark, Ruskin Bond. At a ruin upon a hill outside the town, I found some shelter from a summer storm. An alcove in a wall, moss-green and redolent of bats, but refuge from the wind and rain, and entrance once to what had been a home, a mansion large and spacious. Now dream-wrecked, desolate, and as I stood there pondering upon the mutability of stone, I thought I heard a haunting cry, insistent on the wind. "Oh, sun, please let me in. Oh, sun, please let me in." Just the soughing of the wind in the bending, keening pines, just the rain sibilant on old stones. Or was it something more, a voice, trapped in the woof of time, imploring still, and lingering at some door which stood where now I sheltered on a barren hill? At home that night I settled down to read, the bed lamp on. The night was warm, the storm had passed, and all was outside, when someone moved about, came tapping on the door. "Who's there?" I called. The tapping stopped, and then, entreating, came that voice again. "Oh, son, please let me in." "Who's there? Who's there?" I cried, and crossed the cold stone floor, paused for a moment, hand on catch, then opened wide the door. Bright moonlight streamed across the sill and crept along the stair, and I peered outside to right and left. Bright road return my stare. But long before the dawn I heard that tapping once again, not on the door this time, but nearer still, now rapping quickly on the window pane. I lay quite still and held my breath, and thought, surely it's the old oak tree, leaves gently tapping on the glass. Or a moth, or some great beetle winging past, but through the darkness pressing in, as though in me it sought its will, as though in me it yet would dwell. "Oh, sun, please let me in. Oh, sun, please let me in." Underdone, overdone, undone. F.W. Bain. There was once a Brahmin named Kritakarita who neglected the study of the Vedas and walked in the black path, abandoning all his duties and associating with gamblers, harlots, and outcasts. And he frequented the cemeteries at night and became familiar with ghosts and vampires and dead bodies and impure and unholy rites and incantations. And one night, amid the flaming of funeral pyres and the reek of burning corpses, a certain vampire of his acquaintance said to him, "I'm hungry. Bring me fresh meat to devour, or I will tear you in pieces." Then Kritakarita said, "I will bring it, but not for nothing. What will you give me for it?" The vampire replied, "Bring me a newly slain Brahmin, and I will teach you a spell for raising the dead." But Kritakarita said, "That is not enough," and they haggled in the cemetery about the price. At last, that abandoned Brahmin said, "Throw in a pair of dice that will enable me always to win at play, and I will bring you the flesh you require." So the vampire said, "Be it so." Then Kritakarita went away, and knowing no other resource, secretly murdered his own brother, and brought him to the cemetery at midnight. And the vampire kept his word, giving him the dice and teaching him the spell. Then, some time afterwards, Kritakarita said to himself, "I will try the efficacy of the spell that the vampire has taught me." So he procured the body of a dead Chandala, and taking it at the dead of night to the cemetery, placed it on the ground and began to recite the spell. But when he had got halfway through, he looked at the corpse and saw its left arm and leg and eye moving horribly with life, the other half being still dead. And he was so terrified at the sight that he utterly forgot the rest of the spell and leaped up and ran away. But the corpse jumped up also, and a vampire entered its dead half, and it rushed rapidly after him, shuffling on one leg and rolling its one eye and yelling indistinctly, "Underdone, overdone, undone." But Kritakarita fled at full speed to his house, and getting into bed, lay there trembling. And after a while he fell asleep. And then suddenly he awoke, hearing a noise, and he looked and saw the door open, and the corpse of that dead Chandala came in, and shuffled swiftly towards him on its left leg, rolling its left eye, with its dead half hanging down beside it, and crying in a terrible voice, "Underdone, overdone, undone." And Kritakarita sprang out of bed and ran out by another door, and mounting a horse, fled as fast as he could to another city a great way off. And there, he thought, "Here I am safe." So he went day after day to the gambling hall, and playing with his dice, won great sums of money, and lived at his ease, feasting himself and others. But one night, when he was sitting among the gamblers in the gambling hall, throwing the dice, he heard behind him a noise of shuffling. And he looked round, and saw coming swiftly towards him on one leg the corpse of that dead Chandala, with its dead half rotting and hanging down, and its left eye rolling in anger, and calling out in a voice of thunder, "Underdone, overdone, undone." And he rose up with a shriek, and leaped over the table, and fled away by an opposite door, and left that city, and ran as fast as he could, constantly looking behind him through the forest, for many days and nights, never daring to stop even to take breath, till he reached another city a long way off. And there he remained, disguised and concealed, as it were, in a hole. But all the gamblers in that gambling saloon died of fear. And after some time he again accumulated wealth by gambling in that city, and lived in extravagance at his ease. But one night, when he was sitting with a courtesan whom he loved in the inner room of her house, he heard the noise of shuffling. And he looked round, and saw once more the corpse of that dead Chandala coming swiftly towards him on one leg, with its dead half, from whose bones the flesh had rotted away, hanging down, and its left eye blazing with flames of rage, calling out with a voice like the scream of Ravana, "Underdone, overdone, undone." Then that woman, then and there, abandoned the body in her terror, and Kritakarita rose up and ran out by a door which led out upon the balcony, while the Chandala hastened after him. And finding no other outlet, Kritakarita flung himself down into the street, and was dashed to pieces, and died. Translated from the Sanskrit by F. W. Bain, 1901, in A Digit of the Moon. The Meerut Graveyard, John Lang. I cannot leave Meerut without taking the reader to the churchyard of that station. An Indian churchyard presents a very different aspect to a churchyard in England or elsewhere. The tombs, for the most part, are very much larger. When first erected or newly done up, they are generally of chunam plaster, which somewhat resembles Roman cement, but after exposure to only one rainy season and one hot weather, they become begrimed and almost black. The birds, flying from structure to structure, carry with them the seeds of various plants and herbs, and these, if not speedily removed, take root and grow apace. A stranger wandering in the churchyard of Meerut might fancy that he is amidst ruins of stupendous antiquity, if he were not aware of the fact that 50 years have scarcely elapsed since the first Christian corpse was deposited within those walls, which now encircle some 5 acres of ground, literally covered with tombs in every stage of preservation and decay. I was conducted in my ramble through the Meerut churchyard by an old and very intelligent pensioner who had originally been a private in a regiment of light dragoons. This old man lived by the churchyard, that is to say, he derived
Sample complete. Ready to continue?